And batterer programs over the years have proliferated to a huge extent. And what we've really, and this is the very short version of all of this, batterer programs have gone through some evolution in time, kind of along the lines of can and do men change? When we were looking at and thinking in the 70s that men were out of control, the great advocate Susan Schechter, who's now deceased, unfortunately, was on the faculty at the University of Iowa, asked the important question: if men are out of control and you batterer programs are trying to teach them how to be in control of themselves, then why are they only doing this at home? Why are they not beating up the police officer who arrests them? Why are they not beating up the judge who they're standing before and sentencing him to whatever the court disposition is? They beat up their police officer, they beat up the judge, or they beat up a coworker, there would be really, really serious consequences. But here in this country, still today, if they beat up their partner at home, the consequences aren't as serious as if they went out into the park and beat up a stranger. If you beat up a stranger in the park, you're going to jail, most likely. If you beat up your wife or partner, you're not necessarily going to jail. You might go to a batterer program, you know, or maybe less. The judicial response is very inconsistent in terms of consequences and dispositions that they impose for criminal acts of domestic violence on offenders. Still to this day, it's a huge problem. So men are going to these batterer programs that have evolved over the years, and one of the great women who was head of the Pennsylvania State Coalition for many, many years was Barbara Hart, who's a lawyer by trade, but you would think she is a victim's advocate, much like Faith is. And she called together in the late 80s batterer programs across this country and said to them, you know, I realize you are trying to do your very best and you're well-intended, but you need to stop it because you're causing more harm than good. So the learning from that is men who were going to batterer programs were not necessarily stopping their behavior. To some extent, they were coming home from those programs really pissed at, and don't put that in a movie, really ticked off that they were having to go to this program and then taking out on their partners. Now, the batterer programs weren't causing that to happen. And batterer programs weren't making smarter batterers. Batterers were just doing that because they wanted to do it. So looking at the words of Barbara Hart, is our batterer program's efficacy really what they were intended? No, they weren't stopping men. What we've learned, to make a very long story short, is that men don't need to attend a batterer program in order to be abusive or stop their abuse. Men can stop their abuse and do stop their abuse. Remember, they didn't abuse the police officer. They didn't abuse the judge. They don't abuse their coworkers. They only abuse their partner at home because they can most likely maybe get away with it in a way that they could not in other aspects of their social environment. So men can and do change. They don't necessarily need to attend a batterer program to do that. The batterer program I run is not about fixing men who are abusive or getting them to stop. My batterer program is about accountability. How we held him accountable within the context of a criminal justice response to his criminal acts of domestic violence. We impose batterer program sanction on the level of offense that it's appropriate. In other words, if a man belongs in jail, he's got to go to jail, not to a batterer program. But if it fits for the level of offense he committed, fine, send him to my batterer program. That's why we don't accept men in our program voluntarily. So the easiest analogy that most people are familiar with, I know I'm familiar with it, is if you're driving along and you're speeding and you get stopped by the police officer, he gives you a ticket, you go to traffic court, and they're going to dispose of your case by you taking a defensive driving course. You go to the defensive driving course, you pay your money, you attend those classes. If you stop attending and don't complete it, they probably take your license away. You complete it, you get to keep your license, and your traffic offense is disposed of. That course, defensive driving course, its client is the traffic court. And the traffic court and that defensive driving course held us as speeders accountable for our offense of speeding. In essence, that's what my batterer program does. My client is the criminal justice system, whether that's probation, parole, family court, criminal court, IDV courts, sometimes CPS, sometimes, what do you call it when you go to work? It's EAP program, Employee Assistance Program. There has to be some leverage attached in order to attend my program, because we're about accountability. We're not about fixing him. He doesn't need to be fixed. It's not that he is a deficit like I can't communicate, or I have stress, or I drink, or I take drugs. Those might be contributing factors, but they are not the cause of his abuse. If you think back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of domestic violence, and what is domestic violence? It's all the things in our culture that still give permission and privilege to men, that gives them power and says that's okay, in a way that we don't give power and privilege to women. So it empowers him to be abusive. And he believes he has this entitlement simply because he's a man, the king of his castle, over his intimate female partner, whether that's his wife or girlfriend or whatever. So if you think about that and put them together, that's how this continues to be a huge problem in this country. So men can change. So it's about power and privilege. It's not about him needing some kind of mental health or counseling or therapy in order to stop. He can stop if we tell him to stop. Look at all what we've done in this country about drunk driving, done by MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. 20 years ago, we used to ask the question, oh, did you get home all right? You know, kind of make a joke out of it, you know? Nobody would ever do that today. If somebody gets in the car and drives drunk, we think that that's disgusting, because there has been a social change around that. If we think about civil rights, the social change that's occurred around civil rights. 15 years ago, if we were sitting in this room, I bet you there'd be ashtrays all along this table, and whoever smoked would be smoking, and nobody would think a thing about it. If anybody lit up now, I'm not sure exactly what would happen, but I don't know if I'd want to know what would happen, you know? Nowadays, if you want to smoke, you got to go outside. Many times you have to go 30 feet from the building. That has been a social change. What we need to do to end domestic violence is not more batterer programs. We need to get batterer programs to stop doing things that make it look like men need therapy to stop. We need batterer programs to hold men accountable. We need to hold men accountable so that they stop, in a way that they don't do this to the judge, they don't do this to the police officer, they don't do this at work. So that it's not okay to be doing it at home, and never say he's the king of his castle. That's a social change that we need to have happen in this country that we have not yet had happen, despite the work of Better Women's Advocates for the last 30 years. Better Women's Advocates have been doing social change work for 30-some years. That's where I learned to do this, from being with Better Women's Advocates, you know? So, for some more information about domestic violence, if you're really interested, there's a National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which I'm a member of, and it's a great organization. It's been around for 30 years.